The last component to be constructed is the drawers. The fronts of the drawers are sawed to length, and this is from the quarter-sawn white oak boards we selected earlier. There are three different drawers on this cabinet. The sides of the drawers will be made of hard maple. These are also sawed to lengths. There'll be lengths for the sides and the back of each drawer. Now I'll set the rip fence to cut the width of the drawer sides and back. These pieces are the sides and back of the 7.5-inch drawer, and I didn't have a 7-inch board, so these are only 6 5/8. So what I'm looking for now is some of these cutoffs that'll give me 7.5, and I'll have to do some glue up. So that one's that one's 7.5. All right, that gives me 8 inches. Okay, so I have to glue these up. This is a panel gluing jig that I made up. And the way this works, I have 3 clamping surfaces. The center one here is coated with plastic tape so that the glue doesn't stick to it. And then I have a caul that I clamp down on the top of the joint. And it's got tape also to keep the glue from sticking. But this one is slightly curved. So when I clamp it down, it gets a good clamp all the way across the wood. So I will clamp it down this way to keep it flat, and then I'll put clamps on it this way to clamp it together. Glue on the edges. So glue it. Once I get the caul on, I usually loosen up a little bit on these clamps, get it to settle down, and then reclamp it. Okay, we'll let that stay in there for 30 minutes, and it'll have the panel clamped together, and the joint's usually very flat, no step in the joint. I glued up these 2 pieces yesterday, so you can see it makes a nice joint, and I extended the pieces, made them large enough for the 7.5-inch drawers. The last one's in the clamp now, so let me take it out. Usually sticks a little bit. There you go. This is the one where I didn't have a scrap piece big enough to make the piece 7.5 inches, so I had to glue 2 scraps on there, but it looks pretty good. So that's a good joint. I'm getting ready to put the dovetails in the drawers, and I've been experimenting a little bit with the type of joint. And one issue I have when I'm making drawers with through dovetails is how to get the drawer front exactly the right dimension to fit the opening. So here I'm experimenting with something. Instead of cutting the dovetails flush with the side, I'm looking at leaving a slight overhang. So you notice how the dovetail board is not parallel to the drawer front is not parallel to the side board, and that gives me some room to plane off this piece here to make it fit the opening. Right now I've just made a beveled cut on the end of the board that leaves a little bit of overhang for planing. The drawers are going to have half-blind dovetails on the front and through dovetails for the back. I'm using a Lee dovetail jig to make the joints. I really like the Lee jig, although it can be a bit fiddly to get it set up, but it's a good tool and I enjoy using it. I had to go out and buy a new router this week. Got me a nice little basic Porter cable router. I have a plunge router that I use for a lot of work, but I couldn't get the bit to remain stable. It kept getting longer as I cut, which you can imagine ruined my dovetail joints. Luckily I was just working on the test pieces. Anyway, I finally got the problems worked out. Now the bit locks in there tight, stays at the right depth, and I got a new router out of it too. So all in all, not a bad day. Alright, there's the pins board, and what I did, these only needed to be about 5/8 inches deep, but instead I cut them about 3/4 of an inch deep. That way I'll have a little extra wood in there that I can use to cut off the edge when I'm fitting the drawer front. And now I'm going to start fitting the drawers to the carcass. And I've got on the bench here the 3 blanks for the 3 drawers. The key thing will be making those blanks fit the carcass. I have to get them pretty close to the right size before I cut them, because there's no forgiveness once you've got the dovetails in the end. So I may go ahead and dovetail one end before I cut it to its final length, but that way I'll have a better feel for how wide the box is going to be once the dovetails are machined. I'll also begin fitting the sides, because every time when you cut a side, of course with the dovetail joints as I'm going to make them, the sides have to be the same height as the front. In addition to that, the sides have to be notched to accommodate these rails that I have to support the drawers. I'm making side hung drawers, so I not only have to get the blank the right size, but I have to locate the position for the rail notches. Now I'm cutting the pins for the through dovetails on the back of the drawer, and that uses a straight bit rather than the dovetail bit. Okay, that's a pretty good fit. I've finished the dovetails for the back of the drawer boxes, and next I want to cut the slots in the side that will ride on these side supports for the drawers. So I'm going to groove these drawers before I cut the dovetail for the fronts. So I'm going to mark all the sides with a mark just to make sure once I disassemble the boxes that I don't get the grooves on the wrong side of the wood. So anyway, once these boxes are grooved, I'll be able to fit the drawers I'm setting up the spacing for the fence based on the measurements I've actually marked on the board from the carcass. So I measure it with the dial caliper. Bottom 64th, and then I use this to set the rip fence. Alright, I've marked the side to make sure I cut the right side. So that side goes down. I'll test that and see how it fits before I cut the other one. You notice that I tried to get the groove to fall inside of one of the tails on the dovetail. It looks like the height is right. Fits on there tight, but I've got just about a 30-second clearance at the bottom. So I'm going to call that good. Cut the second one. Got the dovetail router bit mounted, and now we're going to cut away this first section. Here's the first set of tails. This is what the joint will look like when it's finished. You notice how the pins stick out a little from the side. That's so I have some to cut off. Alright, I've made a test cut moving the fence, and it looks good, so we'll cut the boards now. Now I've marked each board very carefully with a scribe line on the area where I want to cut. I've made 2 mistakes so far on this project, cutting on the wrong place, so I'm going to try not to do it for the drawers. And I'll have to run each set through twice. I tried to do the layout wherever possible so that the groove would fall inside of one of the dovetail pieces so it wouldn't show on the sides.
To Iran.
finished fitting the drawers now. Got a good line around each one of the drawers, and they slide in and out easily. So next stage is to apply the stain. I already have a stain in the first 2 coats of finish on the carcass, but so now we'll put the stain on the drawers. My favorite stain is an oil stain. I tried the gel stains and I don't find them as easy to apply. My favorite applicator is a piece of an old t-shirt. And I usually will put on more than 1 coat. Just depends on how the color looks after the first coat. I'm going to put some stain on the inside of the front board in the drawer, but I probably won't put any finish on the rest of the drawer insides. Really enjoyed that part of the work. Wasn't using the power tools anymore, just using the plane and the chisels and the sandpaper and fitting all the pieces, and so that was kind of fun. The finishing of the piece is almost complete. I've got 2 coats of stain and up to 3 coats, sometimes 4 coats of a varnish coat. So now I'm selecting the pulls, and I've got a couple of choices I'm looking at. Here's one pull, a wooden pull. This good arts and crafts style. I kind of like the pyramid shape, and it actually, I think it's a good proportion for the drawer. The other choice is a traditional stickly style brass pull with a double hung bail. It also matches the rest of the pieces in the bedroom suite. So I'm thinking that this is going to be the one we go with. Once again, I've done tung oil finish. I used tung oil finish on most of the cabinet. I've used tung oil exclusively on the carcass and the drawers, but I decided to put a top coat of a polyurethane varnish on the top. I have had some problems in the past with the tung oil not being a very good water resistant surface for a tabletop. I like to do the sides in the horizontal, but this one's not going to be, I'm not going to be able to do that on this side because the other side's still wet. When I finished it earlier, I finished one side at a time, but today I just want to get it done, get the last coat on there. Been lots of coats going onto this, so I'd be happy to get it finished. Use a little handheld light here to look for skips. Okay. I'm going to call that complete. Well, I'm down to the last few operations. Next thing I want to do is fit these drawers so they're flush. So what I do is I line them up and I like the way they look. And then on the back side I will install some stops. I'll glue and brad a stop here and at each drawer to prevent the drawer from coming back further than I want it. Finally installing the brass handles. I laid this out. First I put tape on the drawer front to protect the finish, and then I laid out a center line top to bottom and a center line right to left. And then using one of these hole spacing gauges for cabinet hardware. I marked the location for a 3-inch wide hole spacing on the handles. Well, it's finished. This is my Arts and Crafts nightstand, styled after a Stickley piece that I admired. And I'll give you a little tour around it. Of course, you've seen it developing, but the drawers are slide on the plastic slides. You can see the grain pattern on the drawers, and I especially like the way the grain pattern on the top drawers matches up. The top was made up of 4 boards, so I will now have bedroom suite made up of king size headboard, a 12 dresser, a drawer dresser, and arts and crafts style desk. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to my channel.